Hello and welcome to the next webinar in our how-to series from Strengthening the Heartland. I'm Amber Letcher and I'm really excited to see you all here today. Before we get started, I have a couple announcements. First, we do have a copy of the handout if you'd like to follow along, so you'll see that in your handout portion of the control panel. We also ask that you fill out a short survey after the presentation today so that we can get some of your feedback. And then if you have questions during the webinar, feel free to type those into the questions or chat box. I will relay those to our speaker. Typically, we do those at the end of the presentation, but if questions come up during, feel free to type those in as well. And with that, we will get started with our presentation today. I'd like to introduce Jennifer C., and she'll be talking to us about youth vaping. Welcome, Jennifer.
Well, welcome. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited and very passionate about this topic. So I know we have limited time, and I do like to open it up at the end for maybe some questions. And I know in a webinar format, it's not completely, interactive. So please send those questions in because I think that we all can learn best from each other during a presentation like this. So how to navigate youth vaping. I'll just tell you a little bit about me first. I'm Jennifer C., as Amber said. I'm a licensed professional counselor and also a licensed chemical dependency counselor in the state of Texas. So I love what I do. I have been in this field for about 10 years. I kind of had a marketing career first, and then I shifted into counseling, which is quite a shift. I have my own private practice, and there's my website, which is just my name, jenniferc.com, and there's a picture of me. At the end of the presentation, I'll give you more specific contact information as far as phone number, email, and all my social media channels as well. So I worked in a variety of agency settings, and that's really when I got involved with working with youth. I work with at-risk youth. I was a case manager. I did a lot of different jobs, as many of us do during grad school to get our hours. And then after I got licensed, I was working in a 24-hour crisis and detox center. And that's really where I got into the substance use portion and went for my licensure for that. And so in my private practice right now, I would say I probably have about 55 active clients, and I would probably say, venture to guess right at this present moment, if I went and looked at my census, so to speak, probably about 60 to 65% are substance use, and I see a lot of youth. So I'm one of the only ones in my area that is kind of a dual licensure. My office is right next to one of the biggest high schools in San Antonio, so I do get a lot of clients from there. Okay, so our objectives today, let's get right to it. So we want to get to identify, the underlying issues of why kids vape. I like to call it the why, and I'll be talking about that a lot during this presentation. I'm all about the why. I'm not so much about the substance that walks through my door, but I'm all about the why are they using that substance, or why are they using any substances, and what's going on where they feel the need to self-medicate. So, identifying those underlying issues is super important to then, treat the substance. We have to learn to approach treatment collaboratively, and I think, that's really for any issue that walks through a door, whether it's mental health or substance use. We can't, be the expert in the room and then have the other person and be not the expert. So we have to really work collaboratively with our client, and that's especially with substance use. I found that the more collaborative you are, the more willing they are to make those changes. We have to educate youth about vaping without alienating them. So how do we do that? We're gonna talk about that a little bit later on, but I think educating without alienating is really, really important. And it is the way that you are going to get that collaborative treatment with the client. And then empowering them. They need to be empowered to make changes, and changes that they want to make, not the changes obviously that we think they need to make. So I think these are just really, really important. I think hopefully at the end of this is some of your takeaways, and these are the 4 most important elements in getting kids and youth to to stop vaping. So what I'm not going to do today because, everybody's got a computer and everybody's got a lot of time on their hands right now because we're all home. But I'm not going to statistic everybody to death because we can all go read our own. But I do think these are just really, really some important numbers to know. About what kind of where the youth are with vaping today. Oops, I just lost my screen. Hold on a minute. So according to the latest study by the Food and Drug Administration, and they did a study in 2017 to 2018, e-cigarette use grew by 78%. I mean, that's huge among high school students. So we really had this kind of explosive this explosive use in a very, very short period of time, because e-cigarettes really didn't come on the market until about 6-7 years ago. And then they just started kind of gaining popularity really, really quickly. And it grew at 48% among middle school students. So they're starting this really, really young, and they're starting vaping a lot younger than even experimenting with other substances. And that's just really, really scary. It's scary on all sorts of levels. But among middle and high schoolers, 5 million were current users, and that means daily. So, and over 1.2 million we're using them daily. Those are scary, scary numbers, especially when you look at the ages that we're working with. It's also just really important to know, and we're going to get into more into the weeds about it later, is, one pod of a Juul pod, which is really popular, it's really little, they look like the little jump drives. One pod is 200 puffs, and that contains 20 cigarettes worth of nicotine. So these were really touted and marketed to youth as safe, and they're just not safe. So there's a real fallacy among among these kids that this is a better option than, say, marijuana or alcohol, and that's just simply not the case. So these are just some really important statistics to know. And here are pictures of some of the devices. I'm not going to go through each one. And I mean, some of them look, like a pipe. It looks like a pipe, right? So we know that, they're smoking. But some of these other ones, these were designed to, to target our youth. These were designed to kind of hide in plain sight. So, you could have one of these out on a desk, and a mom could walk in a room and walk right by it, not even know what it is. And that's exactly the case with many parents that bring kids in. They just don't know what these devices look like. And so that, again, they're kind of hidden in plain sight because they look like pens. You can just put one in your pen, your pen jar in your room, and it blends right in. Or you have it in your backpack and it looks like a jump drive that you're going to stick into a computer. And that's not an accident how these were designed. So that's why, again, that this has just become a real problem, is because kids can just use these and no one is even really aware of what they are. So I think also, in Texas, where I am, they've really cracked down on the vape shops and tobacco shops, and they did an initiative, I think it was in 2018, where they started it really first in my county. I'm in Bexar County. It's spelled Bexar, but it's pronounced Bear. And they were one of the first ones in Texas, in the state of Texas, to make tobacco products, all tobacco, including e-cigarettes, 21. At first it could be 18, but then they bumped that up, and then the state actually followed suit. And I know in a lot of other states are following suit very, very quickly behind that, to make these products available only to 21. And they were making it really, really hard. So what was happening in my county is kids were kind of going into some of the other counties over, but now it's just statewide, it's 21, and they're really finding these shops really, with slapping some big fines on them if they're caught. So I think it's a really, really good initiative that people are doing. Federal mandates recently in 2019 stopped the sale of these vape juices that were flavored, and they were flavored with things like Sour Patch Kid, Captain Crunch, cotton candy, blueberry swirl. I don't really know a lot of adults that want those kind of flavors, so obviously those were marketed towards youth as well, even though the industry, vehemently denied that that's what they were doing. That's what they were doing. So the good thing is that there have been some clamps kind of put down on the industry. So why is nicotine unsafe for youth? So, most e-cigarettes contain nicotine, the addictive drug that's found in regular cigarettes, other tobacco products, chew, things like that. And they were really kind of advertised as no nicotine or low nicotine levels. And these are from the Center of Disease Control, and there's a recent CDC study that found that 99% of the e-cigarettes sold um, in these shops, in these vape shops, it contain nicotine. So there was really no FDA regulations on these products that were sold. That came on the market, and kind of like the CBD industry, it was just not regulated. And now that they're doing all these testing, they're finding, that there's higher levels of nicotine. And so even the ones that were supposed to be really for tobacco cessation, that's what these came on the market, touted to be for, tobacco cessation, they contain nicotine. And so some of these labels don't disclose that they even contain nicotine because, again, they weren't regulated, so they didn't have to. And so, again, 0% nicotine labels have been found to have nicotine. So these kids are, getting addicted, because what is nicotine? It's one of the most highly addictive substances that we have on the market. And we know that nicotine harms, developing adolescent brain. Most kids that walk into my clinic, and even the parents of the youth that are brought into me, don't know that the brain keeps developing until age 25. So you get a 10 or 12-year-old that starts vaping, and yes, I have seen 10 and 12-year-olds that have been vaping. That's really going to affect their cognitive functioning and their cognitive development. It really can harm parts of the brain that control attention, control learning, control mood, and impulse control. And I don't know if, anybody has any teenagers of their own besides ones that they work with, but, what are those 4 things that are, even with a sober mind, are, very, very difficult to navigate as kids are growing, and, their emotional regulation. So you add nicotine, you add any substance into there, and it's just kind of a disaster. The brain synapses, when kids are learning, this is the time when they're learning. Like, let's just say you're learning how to knit, and, at first it's really, really hard to kind of get the knitting patterns, right? You're trying to learn the eye-hand control. But then as you keep doing it, what happens is your synapses in your brain get stronger. So the more you do it, the more you do a stitch, the easier it becomes, and the faster you can get. And then pretty soon you don't even have to look at your hand. You can watch TV and you can knit. The reason why is because every time you do that, your synapses, are just getting stronger and stronger as you're developing that. Well, what happens when you're using any substances, and such as nicotine, then it's impairing the synapse control and the synapse development for those skills. So it's going to actually slow people down. So if they're an athlete, it's going to impair. If they're a musician, if they're in the band, if they're in orchestra, it's going to impair. If they're in debate, it's going to impair some of that that cognitive functioning that we need for those that those synapses provide. And using nicotine in adolescent also increases risk for future addiction to drugs. So there is some research that is done that is any year below age 18 that kids start experimenting with substances, whether it's vaping, whether it's marijuana, whether it's alcohol. Every single year before 18 puts you at a higher risk of developing a substance use problem later in life. So, if they start at 17, it's not quite as bad as if they start at 12 experimenting, because then what happens is it just leads them to experiment with other things, with maybe pills, with other substances. So that's also something that is just super important to know. So, we're here to kind of learn about how to approach. So I just want, it's a little bit of background about vaping and just some really important points that I think we need to know. But let's get to the treatment approach. So one thing that we need to know is we need to use the correct language during our intakes. And I made this mistake really early on, especially when I opened up my private practice, because I would have on my form, do you use substance, do you use, any, prescribed substances that you use, just medications that they use that are prescribed by a doctor, and then are there any, non-prescribed? And I would have a list, and I would say smoking, drinking, alcohol, list all the things, but I didn't have vaping as a separate category. And you really need to, because a lot of this youth, they don't associate vaping with smoking. Smoking cigarettes or smoking marijuana is completely different than vaping. It's kind of its own category. So I think we have to be really, really careful. And sometimes I would just miss that in my intake. So I wasn't really asking about vaping. And again, it wasn't, it was a little bit newer, and it was just kind of coming on the scene. So, but then it would come out later that they were vaping. And so we have to really, really watch our language and differentiate, and make sure that we're asking if they're, if they're vaping, and then if they're also smoking cigarettes, or if they're smoking marijuana as well. Or, the famous thing that everybody loves to do is the dad penning, where they're, they're vaping the marijuana. They're putting the substance in the vape. So we really have to just make sure that we get, that we know what our clients are doing. We don't want to assume the treatment goals of, of the youth either, that are walking through our doors. And I don't know if who's listening, if some of you are school counselors, or field workers, social workers, but I never assume the treatment goal. The parent is usually the one that is calling me, and assuming, the parent is calling me, and they are the ones that want their child to stop, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the child wants to stop. So we never just want to assume the treatment goals, and if we approach it like that, we're just going to not really have a good rapport with our people. And again, here comes the why again. You need to find out your client's why. Why are they vaping? Why are they using? What's going on in their life? What are the stressors that cause them to want to self-medicate? And the best approach with vaping, I found, is just meeting clients where they're at. And again, you have to realize that most kids that are coming through your door, most young adults, really have this fallacy that vaping is safe. So meeting them where they're at, well, they don't think it's that bad. They don't think that vaping is, they could be doing worse things. They could be, smoking marijuana. They could be, taking Xanax bars. They could be doing a lot of other things that their friends are doing. So vaping to them seems kind of benign, kind of one of the most benign things that they can do. But it's really not. So just meeting them where they're at, knowing that that's kind of, how they're coming into your office. One thing also that I found extremely helpful in approaching youth is when you're doing your intake, and I usually don't ask in front of the parent about any substances. I usually save that for when the parent leaves the room, because what has happened when they've walked through your door. In my world, I've gotten a phone call, I've booked, the kid has gotten caught, I've gotten a phone call, parent has come, maybe it's been a week or a week and a half later when I've gotten them in. So, it's already been a week and a half of them kind of getting in trouble at home, maybe being shamed. The parent is just telling them to stop doing this thing that they actually really like doing and don't want to stop doing. And then they get into me, who they definitely don't want to be seen. It was not their really choice to come to me. So, really just kind of waiting until parents are out of the room, or guardian, whoever's bringing them in, and really kind of talking about them, I think also has really helped me. I found that when I just don't bring it up in front of the kid, I think they're kind of surprised because they're expecting us to have this big conversation about it. I will ask why everybody's there for counseling, and the parents like, well, he's vaping, or I caught her with a vape, and she's got to stop it. And I'm like, okay. And then we go on to other things. So I think that also kind of builds rapport with you, with your client, to just not bring it up in front of mom or dad. Excuse me, I'm taking a sip of water. So motivational interviewing, I'm sure a lot of you have experience with motivational interviewing. I'm not going to go into the nuts and bolts of motivational interviewing. I just gave an 8-hour training on motivational interviewing, and you could go on and on. But we just want to kind of, motivational interviewing is just the way to go and the way to approach. So, what is motivational interviewing? Let's just look at the technical definition from Miller and Rolnick, who were kind of the pioneers of this approach. It's a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication, and it keeps, it really focuses on particular attention with the language of change, and that's what we want. We want to, instill and inhabit change in our clients. A change of, we want to have to change their behavior, change their views on vaping. It's designed to strengthen personal motivation, and I have that word personal. Because we have to kind of think of the person. They have to have the motivation, not us. Of course, we're motivated to get them to stop vaping, because that's what we've chosen to do with our life, right? I'm a chemical dependency counselor. I don't want people to use harmful substances, but it's not up to me. It's up to their personal motivation. And it's committing to a specific goal by eliciting and exploring the person's reason for change within an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion. So again, we go back to the meeting them where they're at. It's it's their own reason. And again, I have personal and person highlighted so that we kind of focus on what do they want? What do they want out of this? And, what do they want to change? Not what we want them to change. So it's really, really important that we keep that in mind. So the key points of motivational interviewing, when a helper uses a directing style and argues for change, what's, with a person, and they're ambivalent about it, what's going to happen? It's going to bring out arguments. It's going to bring out the opposite. So again, if anybody has teenagers or works with teenagers, I'm sure all of you, either one or both of those, what's the best thing to do with a teenager? Tell them to stop doing something. You don't like Tommy, tell them to stop dating Tommy, because they'll do it, right? Wrong. So we don't want to direct them and just tell them to stop doing something, because they're going to do the exact opposite. They're more likely to be persuaded by what they hear themselves say. I'm going to say that again. People are more likely to be persuaded by what they hear themselves say. So when we can direct them, and kind of go on this journey with them through motivational interviewing for, them deciding that they need to stop or cut down on their vape usage, when they say it, they're going to start doing it. If we say it, it's just listening to Charlie Brown's teacher. They just hear it, want, 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 want. They've already heard that at home, to stop doing it. And maybe they don't want to, and they probably don't want to. But, when we can kind of guide them to the point where they're like, yeah, maybe this isn't the best for me. Maybe I need to not be doing this. When they say that, then, then you've kind of hit your goal. So motivation and behavioral change. So, motivation, it's a critical element of behavior change. It's the most important one. It predicts abstinence, and it also predicts reductions in substance use. That's why motivational interviewing is the key component to, working with clients. It's very collaborative. Again, we kind of go back to that collaborative environment at the beginning, meeting clients where they're at. You can't give them motivation. Okay, we can't give that to them. Like we can't motivate somebody to exercise, right? They've got to do it. The worst times when I ever put people in treatment, youth or adult, is when when an adult, goes into treatment because their wife or their husband or mom wanted them to. And, but they didn't really want to, they just kind of went to check the box. What always happens when they come out, they relapse because they weren't really there for the right reason. They weren't there for their own motivation. They were just there because somebody wanted them to do it and they just wanted to, stop the nagging. So, but you can help them identify, we can't give somebody that motivation, but we can help them identify reasons, reasons why maybe they should motivate to change, or, why, why that change is needed. And then we can also help them plan. We can help facilitate that planning and that treatment, and, ways to get them there, for them to set the goals, and then for us to kind of guide them and, be that accountability factor for them to check into to help them get there. And so framework for kind of understanding motivation and how it relates to behavior changes is self-determination theory. And there's kind of, two kinds of motivation that are described in the self-determination theory. One is intrinsic motivation. What are our internal motivators? What is our desire? What are our needs? What are our values? What are our personal goals? That's kind of, what comes internally. And we want to kind of get to that point because, intrinsic is super important. It's that self-motivation that we need to kind of get that client to. We need to get that youth to. And everybody's different with that. Everybody has different values and goals. Maybe somebody has, religious values that, that are intrinsic to them, and in their religion, they don't believe in substances. Extrinsic motivation, now we're talking youth, right? So this is a really huge factor, and it can be a double-edged sword. It can be good and bad, right? So they have social influences, there's external rewards, there's consequences. So, what's extrinsic? Is mom and dad gonna, is mom and dad gonna ground them and take them away? Or, are social influences, are, all their friends vape? So they are feeling really, really pressured by that. They don't want to be the only one at the party that's not doing it. They don't want to be uncool. Or maybe it's the person that, just made this new group of friends, that's had struggles making friends, but then this new friend group, they kind of all vape and they don't think it's a big deal. So they are not going to want to get kicked out of that group or kicked out of the Snapchat group chat, because they won't vape. So, we have to kind of get to what's the intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic. And again, extrinsic can be double-edged sword. It can be good or bad. And again, we're talking about teenagers and youth. So again, we just kind of we just need to go through the stages of change. This is the trans theoretical model. I'm sure all of you that work in substance use, this is kind of our Bible, because we have to know what stage of change our client is in, and I can, the more I do this, the more I can kind of, I can point out, what stage of change they're in by just a few key phrases. So you have, pre-contemplative. You have, most kids that walk through my door are really pre-contemplative. It's, they're unaware of the need for change. This is not a problem. It's everybody else has a problem with this, but it's not a problem for me. And then there's the contemplative. So maybe they're thinking about it. And every now and again, I will get somebody that, comes in my door and they're like, I've got to change this. I've got to change this. I just really don't know how to do it. They're kind of contemplating. They want to do it, but the pull is really strong towards, towards the vaping. But they kind of know it's bad, but they don't know how to quit. Then coming to us, hopefully we're going to get them to the prep stage. So, the planning, okay, how are we going to do this? Let's tackle this problem. Let's see how we can, get towards, your goals of stopping vaping. Preparation is planning, and it's gathering confidence. It's kind of, making them aware. It's empowering that client, right? One of our first objectives to get them that, they can do this. And we want to get them to the, all of our goals as counselors and, and educators is to get them to the action stage, taking positive steps to make changes. Okay, I'm doing this. Okay, I'm going to start tracking. I'm going to start tracking my progress. I'm going to report into you next session. I'm in the action stage, and then and then we're in maintenance. Maybe they've stopped vaping. Yay, we've reached our goal. They've achieved the results. The behavior is a daily part of life. But this is a whole cycle. So these stages of change, it's a whole cycle. And most successful changers, they kind of go through the cycles. Maybe they go through it once and relapse back, and maybe maybe they're in contemplation and they can go right to action. But then maybe they can slide back, and then we have to get them back to preparation. So it's a little bit of a cycle, and and it's okay. People aren't gonna. It's always not going to be like a forward continuum. So knowing where your client is in their stage of change is also very, very huge, because if someone is pre-contemplative, we don't want to just push them to action right away, because we're just setting them up for failure, especially with youth. So especially with, with younger adults, and who am I kidding? Especially with a lot of adults as well. So, so just knowing this is really, really important. And, also having your client identify where they are in the stages of change. I have clients do that all the time. Like, where do you think you are in wanting to do this? And I, give them a sheet of the stages of change, and then they'll identify where they are. And then, identifying where they want to get to. Maybe they just want to get to preparation, and that's okay too, because maybe when you get them there, then we'll get that intrinsic motivation, and then they'll have that intrinsic motivation to go forward to action. So a way that I really approach really anybody in my substance use practice, because I have just found it to be the most effective, is we never just want to just go right to sobriety. I use harm reduction. I think harm reduction it's kind of gotten a bad rap over the years, but I think more recently, and I think the more studies that come out about harm reduction that shows that it does work, and it does, harm reduce. I mean, harm reduction, what is it? It's a set of strategies to reduce harm of use. So what could be harm reduction? Harm reduction, not only in the substance use field, but it could be, it could be a very promiscuous teenager that is, having multiple sex partners with unprotected sex. What is harm reduction? Well, it could be maybe, harm reduction is, maybe the first step is just to use protection, because they're not going to stop, having sex with multiple partners, but it's just, maybe having protected sex so that we don't spread diseases. And then maybe getting to the next step of maybe reducing the amount of people, if they're sleeping with, if they have 10 partners, maybe reducing it down, to 5. And so it's just harm reducing. And it's just always assumes. What I love about harm reduction, and especially with youth, is that it just doesn't assume that the goal is it's not sobriety or it's not stopping, because they maybe don't want that. Maybe that's not their goal walking through the door, and most likely it's not. So it's the parent's goal, or it's guardian's goal, or it's whoever's goal, but it's not their goal. So I just approaching it this way just kind of, again, meets the client where they're at. And I think with vaping, That's just really, really important to connect with the youth that way. Harm reduction makes the goals achievable and attainable. So kind of getting off of, vaping. So maybe, maybe they're vaping, maybe they were going through 2 Juul pods a day. Okay, well, what does going through 1 Juul pod a day look like? So maybe, it's versus 2 packs of cigarettes, maybe we can just try and cut it down to 1 and see how that feels, and see, what that does to us, what that does to us physically, what that does to us emotionally, what that does to our anxiety or depression, what it does, at home, our parents a little bit happier. And harm reduction also kind of empowers the client. It helps them empower the client, because then they can be like, oh yeah, wow, I did cut down. Wow, maybe I'm going to cut down a little bit more. And then maybe, what that does is it walks them to that goal of, wow, maybe I just don't need this. Maybe I can handle. So what you're doing in harm reduction is you're kind of building up the toolbox of using other things other than substances in those times. And again, we've identified the why. We've maybe identified why they've done it. Maybe we've delved into, maybe they're stressed out because, their relationship isn't going great, or they didn't, they got cut from the cheerleading squad, or, their grades aren't great and parents really want them to go to an Ivy League school. We've kind of delved into maybe the why of why they're using, and then we can build up that toolbox. Okay, well, if you're stressed, can you call a friend? Okay, if you're stressed, can you go play with your dog because you love your dog so much? Go play with your animals. Doing some other things other than, going to the substance first. So that's, harm reducing. We're building up the toolbox of other things to do other than self-medicate and use. And that empowers the client. What are you willing to do? Again, having them set the goals. What are you willing to do? Let's talk about cutting down first. Cutting down also is not kind of like, they've got this huge mountain in front of them maybe, and maybe vaping isn't the only thing that they're doing. They're drinking, they're using their, the dad penning marijuana, and they're vaping. So, okay, let's start looking at all of these things, and, where can we cut down, or where can we, with the eventual goal of completely cutting off, whatever substance. And so harm reduction is just a really, really awesome approach, I think, because then it's just also, they've been told at home already, or they've been, maybe told. I mean, our school right now, our school has a 0 tolerance for vaping. They really cracked down this year, which is a great thing, because it used to be if they got caught, they'd get, a slap on the wrist, they'd get a call home. Right now they're getting in-school suspension for 3 days minimum. I mean, right off the bat, it's like, do not pass go, do not collect $200. So, just harm reducing maybe some of the trouble that they can get into. So looking at it from that kind of standpoint. I give kids and youth a lot of homework assignments, to kind of, in between counseling sessions, because sometimes maybe they're coming, to me weekly. Usually when I start seeing youth, especially for substances, I try and see them, weekly at first, and then, maybe stepping it down to every other week. But in between, I really want them to kind of I really want them to think about their use and think about their why, because a lot of times they just haven't really even thought about it or identified. They don't even really know how much they're using sometimes. And sometimes when we start identifying that, it kind of shocks them a little bit, and it gives them that intrinsic motivation to change. So one really big thing that I love doing with youth is have them keep a log or a journal of their vaping. Vaping is very ritualistic, and so I ask them about their rituals, much like I would ask, anybody that comes to my door with, drinking. Like, what are your drinking rituals? Like, tell me when you drink. Tell me, the glasses that you use. Tell me the types of drinks that you like. Are you drinking alone? Are you drinking with other people? Are you going places? Ask them about that. They love to tell you. What I found that kids love to tell you about, how they vape, when they vape, if they go on Snapchat and do all the Snapchat, vape challenges. They love it because their parents kind of don't want to know. Their parents are just really mad at them. So just asking them about their habits, and then just having them track it. And it's just super helpful. I recently worked with a girl, and she said that she's like, well, I don't really vape that much. And so I said, okay, we'll keep a log and a journal. Well, she realized that every single time she got in the car to drive, she was 16, she vaped in the car, and she was driving a lot. She was a cheerleader. She was going to practice. She's going to friends. She's real social. She's going to work. And so she kept her log, and she was shocked by how much she was vaping. And so, we kind of worked on some things. Like I said, okay, well, what about if we just don't vape in the car? And it was really hard for her. And what if you can just like, maybe just put the vape in the trunk, put it in the trunk of the car, when you get in, so you're not tempted, so it's not right there, so you can't just grab it at the light, or you can't. And then, we put a manipulative in her, in her cup holder where she had her vape. We had like a little squeezy ball, and she would just use the squeezy ball. And then she was like, I really don't need to vape in the car. And she was also saving money. So she realized how much money she wasn't even keeping track of the spending. So that's a huge intrinsic and extrinsic motivator, is money, because then she just had more money to go to Sephora and go to, do some other things, go to Starbucks and get some drinks for herself, where she didn't have it before, because all of her money was going towards all these, vape juices and all the pods that she was buying. Have them make a list of pros and cons. What are the pros about doing it? I think we miss that a lot, because we don't want to talk to people about what makes, why these substances make them feel good, because they shouldn't be using them, right? So they shouldn't make you feel good. But the fact of the matter and the reality is they do make these kids feel good. So find out what are their pros for it. Like, how does it make them feel? What does it help them escape from? Getting to that why. And also the cons. Okay, the cost is usually the biggest con that kids put down, because they need money to get these they're very expensive, the mechanisms that are used. Some of them are up to like $150 for some of the real fancy ones. So, and then if someone steals that from them, or they lose it, that's a lot of money, to explain and explaining to their parents where the money goes. Find out the information that they know. I always just ask clients, well, tell me what you know about vaping. Just tell me what you know, and talk about it and have these conversations, because 99% of the time they're very misinformed. So some of the information that they're telling me, and they've really only heard it from friends or heard it from their peers, that these are safe, or they've bought into these great marketing campaigns that these companies have sold these kids, that it's a safer alternative, that there's no nicotine, zero nicotine, and just find out what information they know, so that you can talk about that. And then give them the facts that just have some, have the CDC has some really just great sheets. If you go to the CDC website, and just Google CDC vaping, it'll take you to this whole section. There's just some statistics and facts, and we can just present it to them. So presenting them just the information and the facts, not judging them. It's not being judgmental about what they're doing. It's just providing them information that could be useful to them and can make them start thinking about this habit. Have the client research that too. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, after the first appointment, okay, can you just bring me some research, like research me, or show me where you talk about where it's safe. Can you tell me that? And they'll bring me back some information, like look it up on their phone and just bookmark it and bring it back to me next time. Let's talk about it. And so have them do the research and empower them. I had one client do that. And she Googled it, and all the stories were coming up that have been in the news recently about all these kids that devices blew up, or the lung transplants that have been happening with some of these youth. And that there was actually one in our own community here, and people knew about it. And so it really kind of shocked and awed her. It scared her, and that was a good thing, because she came to that again. People are more empowered by what they hear themselves say. So she was like, wow, I didn't realize that all of this could happen. I didn't know that these things could blow up in your face. I said, yeah, they happen, they have. And she was a real beautiful girl. I said, could you imagine having scars right now on your face, for the rest of your life because you've been vaping? And she was like, oh my gosh, that would be terrible. So she stopped. I mean, her own research really made her stop. And then I just kind of helped her with, with ways to, building up that toolbox for other things that she could do while she was vaping. There's some great apps and counters out there. Kids are they love to be transparent about their own lives to other kids. That's why social media is such a powerful double-edged sword for these kids. I have that picture there of them all on their phones. There's really great apps that shows them how long they've been sober from. There's all these quit smoking apps, and it has counters of how many days you've gone without smoking, and they love to kind of put that out there in a positive way, and empower other kids. So there's like apps and counters. So maybe have them put that on their phones, use an app, and the app also gives them like a daily motivation quote or something that really kind of keeps them positively on the journey to kind of keep the not vaping going. And I think that those are really powerful too for kids. to use because they love using their phones. Parental involvement. So again, a lot of the parents come into me and they're not educated about vaping. I recently had a Mormon family that came in, and there's no substances allowed, in that religion, and so she just hadn't grown up. The mom it was just so off her radar of even knowing anything about it, or even what they look like, or what the effects were, because it was just not part of her world. And so just educating the parents the same way we have to educate the kids is just really key, because again, a lot of the times the parents think that these are really, really safe. And sometimes parents will come in and say, well, they could be doing this, or at least it's not marijuana, or at least they're not drinking, or at least they're not, at least they're not on meth. Well, again, educating them that, that their kid experimenting could lead to that. Just show them that research, show them those facts. We want to just have parents not shame the kids about vaping or any substances. And sometimes I think parents can tend to just jump to that right away. Well, why are you doing this? We didn't raise you like this. You're better than this. And that will really, what is that going to do? That's just really going to drive the kid to use and self-medicate away from that shaming environment. So I talk to parents a lot about really just not using shaming language. Again, having the parents know about the why the kid is doing it, so that they can look for signs and they can kind of help along in that journey. Behavior contracts are great for parents, and sometimes it keeps the parents accountable, because sometimes I found that parents can be a little bit sometimes permissive when it comes to vaping, because again, they've also bought into the marketing, or they've done a little bit of reading, or people have told them, well, it's not that bad. And people just aren't informed about the dangers of this. I think we are now getting to the point of having more research, because we're at a point where these have been on the market long enough. Before, we just didn't even have the research or the numbers. It was just going so fast and furious, and the use was just skyrocketing. So we were scrambling to get to know what we needed to know about these, about the dangers. And then we found out that yes, they are more dangerous than originally touted. And we also need to know the parents' attitudes about substance use, because I had a mom come in about vaping, about the kid, and you can't make this stuff up. What did she do in the middle of the session? She pulled out a vape. And so I think, the parent was just kind of like, well, she's vaping, I can do it, but she can't. And I mean, there's some truth to that. I mean, it's an adult, not a kid, but and no, I don't allow vaping during my sessions. I had asked her to put it away, but I mean, here she's bringing in the kids. So sometimes we have to know the level of, and the attitudes about the parental involvement and with substance use and vaping. What are their values? What is their tolerance level for it in the home? So here's just a little case study, and I'll just talk about it really quickly, because I know we want to get to maybe some questions. And I have changed, information enough so that this is non-identifiable, but Emily's a 15-year-old white and Hispanic girl. She was caught by her mom vaping and called you for counseling. She is resistant during the intake. During the intake, you discover that Emily is also experimenting with other substances. You also discover her mom is vaping as a tobacco cessation method. Mom's in recovery from cocaine, and dad abuses alcohol. Parents are recently divorced. So normally in a presentation, I would have a big discussion about this and have people kind of talk about how they would approach this. But there's a lot going on here, and then there's a lot more that we discover, right? And we discovered that why she's experimenting with other substances, so it's not just the vaping. So she's very, very at high risk. When people come in and they're only vaping, I don't want to say the word just, because I think it's obviously I think this is a very, very big deal. If it's just, if it's vaping is the only substance they're using, I approach it differently than if there's multiple. So sometimes just knowing and getting some of that information, and especially getting that, getting that parental history on, on both sides, and anywhere down the line, if there's substance use or abuse in the family, is just really important to know. And in this case, mom was vaping, and she was stealing from the mom, but the mom wasn't really punishing her for it. The mom was just kind of like, well, I do it, so I really can't tell her no. Yes, you can. You're the parent. This isn't an equal relationship. There is a power, differentiation. You make the rules for her, and she, she needs to know what those rules and expectations are. So again, working with the parents enough, but not alienating your client, and tattling on them every time that they tell you that they're vaping is really important as well. So I think we're maybe at the point, Amber, for questions. I know I've done a lot of talking. So this is my contact information. So my website, my phone number, my email, and I have social media channels where I love to engage with people and I love sharing information. I put a lot up about vaping and substances and youth because I am so passionate against it, and I think it's a great way for us to educate others and bring the latest research and bring the latest articles. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, I have a LinkedIn. I post a lot on LinkedIn and also on Twitter.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was excellent information. And we do have some time for questions at the end, so I'll give people a chance to type those in. We did have a couple of requests for your presentation, so we will share that handout when we send out the email with the presentation as well as the handout. So they wanted to reference that again later.
Absolutely.
We'll give people a couple minutes here. You talked about harm reduction and using that as a strategy. I wondered about how you maybe talk to parents about a harm reduction approach if they are in this mindset of my child's vaping and I would just want them to stop. Why would you encourage harm reduction versus just cessation?
So especially with youth, I use harm reduction, and how I tell parents, this is a great question, by the way. I tell parents, because once we show them that they can cut down, it usually leads to them eventually stopping because they start to see the benefits. They start to, and I use it with adults as well. I mean, so this isn't just for youth only. It just empowers them, and they start to see changes. Maybe they just feel better. Maybe they're sleeping better. Maybe just their clothes don't smell as much because even though these aren't completely smokeless, I can always tell when I walk into a room or an area and someone's vaping. I'm like, ugh. So they just kind of start to feel better, and it just empowers them. They're like, wow, I went a couple hours. I'm gonna go. I just went 3 hours. I'm gonna go 5. And then before you know it, they're kind of adding on, and I've really had some great. And then eventually, I've had just a great success rate doing this with my clients because it just empowers them to kind of keep that momentum going. So I don't use harm reduction for like meth. I mean, but with IV users, I've also used, well, okay, if you're shooting up with needles, can you just use a clean needle every time and not share, so that you don't get Hep B, and then we don't, spread hepatitis B, all over, and we don't do other dangerous things. So I mean, sometimes it just, kids are like, okay, yeah, I can do that, I can try that, and they're willing to try it, and then they start trying it, and it just kind of snowballs into, eventually they just stop.
Okay, it looks like we have one question here from a viewer. What are you seeing with vaping THC? So what does it look like? How does that work?
So they that's kind of also known as dad petting. I think I kind of just briefly touched on it. Yeah, so what they're doing is they're putting the and sometimes they're mixing the THC with the vape juice, and they put they because you have to have some juice or liquid in the mechanism to make it work. So yeah, so it's just kind of heating up marijuana, and I think what happens with the dab petting is that the marijuana just kind of gets delivered into the system a lot stronger and more concentrated. If like we need our marijuana right now these days to be more concentrated, but and they're just using more of it. So one thing that I really, also kind of going back to that first slide about kind of the language and vernacular, we don't just want to say vaping, what are you vaping? Are you vaping just vape juice, or are you also doing marijuana? Are you, sometimes people are, I have one kid who was like, crushing up a Xanax and putting it in there and vaping that because they just want to see what's going to happen with it, because again, they just kind of think it's so safe.
Right, right.
So, so yeah, that's just it's a very dangerous trend.
For sure. Another question here. We've presented vaping to local school students from grades 5 to 12. How can we make the biggest impact on them to maybe convince them to reduce use? They've given statistics, they've presented facts and videos, but it seems like they kind of blow it off. And so they're interested in how to make a big impact, if there's anything that's been really convincing to some of your youth that you've worked with.
I just did, I was just on a panel at our NEISD PTA kind of put on a panel, and I think it was great only because it wasn't just adults talking to kids, they had kids involved. So I think if you can really get a testimonial and get a kid that has vaped and stopped, and I think that messaging resonates better than any adults telling kids what to do. So I think incorporating those testimonials. I know that some of the youth that I've even just seen some of these new national news stories that had the lung issues, the popcorn lung, were in the hospital. Just connecting them or incorporating that into the presentations, or having live kids from the actual school that are willing to talk about it is just resonates a lot more.
That's a great recommendation. I think they always want to hear from each other. Seems more
Yeah.
relatable.
And again, like I said earlier, kids love to talk about it. They love to talk about their vaping habits. They love to talk about and so it's just seeing if one of their peers stopped, and especially if it's someone that they admire, or having kids in the school just talk about kids from different organizations. If you can get a football player, if you can get somebody, get some of the high profile people in the school to maybe get on board and be an ambassador for it is just huge.
Another question, what would be the best approach you would use when a parent buys the vape and uses it with their children?
Yeah, so there's a lot of research that shows that with any substance, sometimes people like to teach kids how to drink correctly or how to use correctly, and there's a lot of research that just shows that does the opposite effect. They want to teach people how to drink responsibly, for example, and it just shows that if you introduce alcohol in your own home and allow that, it creates a very permissive environment. So, I just tell parents, number one, it's illegal. Especially in my state, under 21, it's illegal. So I will just tell the parent that they're doing something illegal, to their child. And again, just that educating. Yeah, I literally just encountered this last week. I had a mom who caught her daughter. She was, dab penning, which is the, marijuana, and the mom is a marijuana smoker. And so the mom said, well, I'm just kind of thinking that maybe I should just buy the marijuana because I know that my marijuana is safe. And I said, absolutely not. Do not give your 15-year-old daughter marijuana. That is just giving her carte blanche. That's just giving her, a hall pass to use other things. So it's okay to be directive, and it's okay with parents to say, just to incite research. I mean, this isn't my personal opinion. I mean, it is my personal opinion. It's my clinical opinion, but it's also, there's research that just shows that it's just not a good path, and that it will lead them down a path for, probably having a problem later on.
Okay, and one more here. Is individuals vaping CBD oil at a low percentage, so like 0.3, is that any different than having THC in their vape?
Well, again, I think the danger we get into with CBD oil and CBD products in general, and I think it's going to be almost like the next vape trend. I think they're not as safe as they're touted to be, and we're finding that out right now. There was a recent study that I just read. I can't remember who did the study, but they just kind of had people go around the country and just get CBD products from different different shops, and the rates of THC in the CBD was way higher, again, because it's not regulated, than advertised. So, is 0.3 really 0.3? I don't think anything is safe to, it's just not safe at all. So I wouldn't recommend that as any sort of alternative. And I would also, again, we don't really know what the levels are, and we don't know what the long-term effects are yet because we don't have those studies. So I don't know if that answered that
Okay, that
question.
looks like the last. Yes, I think it did for me. I don't see a follow-up here. But if there is, we'd be happy to send that to you and get some clarification if that does come in later. I don't see any other questions here, and in respect to everyone's time, I think we'll close out. Thank you so much, Jennifer. This was excellent. I
Absolutely.
definitely learned a lot. Yes. And we will be sending the presentation out if you've registered, so you'll get a recording of that. And then you have Jennifer's contact information, but again, we're happy to send more questions her way too later. Thank you again and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.